Cans it up, the Penguins were changing. They're able to come out relatively easy. Here's Keith Primo with it first. Primo cuts the inside, scores! There it is! Keith Primo! The much maligned center of the Philadelphia Flyers wins this game in the fifth overtime.
Everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 151. I'm your host, Isaiah. The Flyers have some big decisions to make, and they might have to take back some of the words they just said not too long ago. Just a reminder that the O&B Puckcast is brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com and, of course, Jim's South Street, 400 South Street, the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries you'd ever want. They're served in the grandest Philadelphia tradition, 40 years of the best. And if you live down near Jim's and you can't get there, no worries. They use DoorDash. You'll get that great food delivered right to your door. So when you want the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, fries, Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And with that, just want to introduce with me tonight our buddy, Chef B. Chef, how are you?
Good. You know, hopefully we'll get into some of the problems that are plaguing the team and some possible ways to look to the future and hopefully remedy some of them.
Yeah, hopefully. Just a note, the great Dan Silver may be joining us tonight. We're not sure. He has some other obligations. We were aware of that. There's no surprises. Everybody's okay. So if he can come in and contribute tonight, we'd love to have him as usual. So since our last show, the Flyers are going 1-6. They've lost 5 in a row. Some of these are due to another spate of injuries. Guys like Cam York were hurt, Rasmus Ristolainen, and some other players as well. And of course, that forced Keith Yandel into the lineup, and that hasn't always been pretty. But either way, they're tracking for roughly 62 points. Which would be the worst season they've had since the 56-point disaster in 2007. So, yeah, that's rough. Chef, before we get into things, I just wanted a recognition to Mike Bossy. He passed away. You know, Chef, he's a little bit before your time, or just when you were starting to follow the Flyers, Mike Bossy was exiting the scene. He was in the league for 9 years, but what a 9 years, right? And he's still the goals per games played leader all time. It's amazing. In 752 games played, he scored 573 goals, 1,126 points. I called him the first official Flyers killer. Whenever we were in a tight game against the Islanders, Mike Bossy, he would just always score that back-breaking goal that would kill us. And you couldn't dislike him, though. He was kind of like a more mild-mannered kind of player for the era that he played in. I guess a couple years ago, he wrote an essay for the Players Association Journal of what he would tell himself, his 14-year-old self. And Dan and I were going back and forth about that. And he was a good guy on a great team. Of course, those Islander teams from 1980 to 1983 won 4 straight Stanley Cups. And he was an all-time great, and I think he could have played in any era. An incredible, accurate shooter, a pure goal scorer on a team that was loaded in every other respect. Any thoughts? Do you remember his career?
When you're growing up, there are certain players, especially with us back then, the league was a lot smaller, right? So you saw guys a little bit more frequent, from other parts, especially the aisle in New York teams and stuff like that. It was always interesting. He was one of those players that you loved, even though he was on the other team. And it was a player that you wanted so bad on your team. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's some players that just transcended game, and for him to stand out as much as he did, with some of the other players that were around at that time, when I watched the games, when they played the Islanders, I was more like, that's when I started watching really frequently, 81, 82-ish. And, by the time, I think he was done, 87?
Yeah,
was his last season?
87, yeah, I don't have that right in front of me. But
So, it was when the Flyers were relevant, during that time, but that's when I was really into the meat of it. And it was one of those players like, darn, man, I wish we had him. And, I was sitting there thinking about it going, he would have been great to have on our team. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I remember from it. I just remember that he was such a really good player. I enjoyed genuinely watching him play. There were certain players like, that you didn't want on your team because you enjoyed, I mean, especially back then, and maybe not so much now, but back then you just enjoyed hating them. Maybe like Dale Hunter, or players like that you just remember that stuck out to you, that were on the opposing teams, like, and you just wanted to keep hating them. So, but he was one of those players that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. You were right. 1987 was his last year. He had a back injury. His last year, he had 38 goals, 37 assists for 75 points in 63 games. And he just couldn't skate, and he just, couldn't play at a level that he had established on that great line with Trottier and the recently departed Clark Gillies. So, he was a great player, and our condolences go out to the Bossie family. Mike Bossie dead at age 65. Okay, so, Chef, it seems like a lot of people are now coming to conclusions about where the Flyers are at that sound a lot like where we were at like 2-3 months ago. And even you hear that with Jason Martinez. Charlie O'Connor just came out with a really good article about the so-called aggressive retool that Dave Scott and Chuck Fletcher are trying to sell us on, and only a few moves away, whatever. And I did a show with JJ, Jim Jackson, on Steel Flyers, and he was, singing that tune back then. But it's really hard to sell that to anybody. The Flyers are headed towards an all-time bad season, and Charlie does a really good job in his Athletic article backing up the point that even if guys like Couturier and Ellis were in the lineup using WAR models, wins against replacement models, it wouldn't have made that much difference. This is really a bad team, and there's no amount of moves they can make unless they had in a once-in-a-lifetime deal of a steal of a trade that would change it.
Unfortunately, there's way too many, I want to say, uncertainties right now, too. And, not to mention, you have players like Ellis, that's completely uncertain. We don't even know what's going on with him, and that sounds to me, that just screams trouble. They can say all you want, that not be in the picture, and they've got a scheduled procedure or something along those lines, but still, to me, that screams like there's something else going on. It's just a guess to me. I don't have any inside information. But And then you look up and down the lineup and what they, once they gave away what they had, basically all they had almost that they could give up at the time, you're left with an injured, Risto's out, Atkinson's out. There were questions. Farabee was hurt briefly, so we were told, and lower body injuries here and lower body injuries there. It's just
that's just short term,
Yeah, that's just short, and exactly that's my point. And we're looking at the team, and they're getting like really blown out. I was at the Washington game, 92, in Washington. It was horrible. I mean, what happened there? It was just like. And the funny thing about it too is, the Caps fans, they were leaving too. They were leaving because it was getting to be boring. There were a couple of diehards there towards the end, but with like 7 minutes left in the game, it was pretty much pretty much empty in there. We were able to walk out no problem. I mean, that's scary. There was a decent amount of Flyers fans there. I think Dan was there. I tried meeting up with him. I couldn't get a hold of him. I couldn't find him. So, but the point being, it was just an ugly showing. And to me, the product on the ice, I've always said over the years, you can have a team that might not have, and we spoke to this when we had Shane on, that they might not be a superstar in there. There might not be this. But if there's four solid lines, that's fine. Number 2s and 3s all down through. Okay, that's fine. But what we also talked about too was cohesion. The team's got to be a team. And to me, watching these games, I watched, you have some very good individual efforts. And I'm sure we'll speak to that in the rookies a little bit later on, the young kids. But other than that, they're not playing like a team. Everybody's all over the place. Their line changes are horrible. I saw that in Washington before even the 2 games against Buffalo. I mean, that was horrible there. It happened a little bit there in DC too. So to look at this team, it's more than just lack of talent. It's lack of cohesion. It's not a team. They seem to be, everybody's doing their own little thing, and there's no game plan almost. And I don't know if it's the coaching because, like I said, like we all know, it's a lame duck coach situation. But still, at some point, like you gotta at least, if you want another job, you gotta kind of like break down and make sure that these guys are playing together as a team if you want to secure any kind of job in the future.
Yeah, well, the problem is the wheels will come off, right?
Yeah.
This is the Flyers. When you're bad 3 out of the last 4 years, there's nowhere to hide with this. Okay. Last year, the bad period was the first period. This year, it's the second period. You had the Anaheim game, and then it was the same thing. Who was it against? Was it against the Rangers or no, Buffalo? They came out really strong against Buffalo after the back-to-back losses with Washington and the Rangers. And it's a nightmare. So they put all the energy into getting off to a good start, which they couldn't last year, and then it just falls apart. This is a loser's lament. This is losers lose. And there's no escaping the conclusion that if they want to bury this team for another 5 years, just go out and sign Nazem Kadri and do all that nonsense. It's like getting Vinny Lecavalier after Briere is bought out and they decide not to re-sign Yager. They tried to bridge the gap in a leadership sense with a player that they thought still had, a little bit more mileage left. Obviously, he was done. I think one scout said he had a turning radius of a Greyhound bus. And for people having trouble figuring that out, that's not good. So I don't want them to make that mistake. You sign a guy who's 29, 30 years old. They got guys that are 30 at center. Look, I know Kadri's having a great year and Johnny Hockey's having a great year. These guys are 28. They're going to be 29, 30 next year. I don't want to go there. I'm done with this. Yeah. It just, they have to sit back and like Charlie's talking about, we've talked about, accept your fate.
Yes.
They're screwed. Okay. What they should do is try, Because what do they have, right? They have a bunch of mid-6 and below talent. I don't think they have a first-line talent on this team. I don't think Couturier is quite there.
Not anymore.
No. Okay?
No.
Now, if they don't have a first-line talent, don't get me wrong, they have players that can play with 2 other first-line players. Those situations exist all throughout the league. I get it. But Flyers don't. They only have one first-pair defenseman, and his name is Ryan Ellis, and they can't count on him. We're just trying to keep it real now. If this is where you're at, now we understand what Shane Malloy was talking about. But I don't think the Flyers are going to buy into that. They're going to try and get higher-end talent. So how do you split that difference? And to me, they have to go and make hockey trades to get younger players like a Dylan Larkin, who's 25, is going to be 26 next year. If I doubt it, but if Pierre-Luc Dubois was going to be available, even going out and getting a guy like Scheifele, who has just a couple years left, so it's not a big commitment. He's 29. He's in the same draft as Sean Couturier. Like, what is that going to do for you?
It's you can't. I much rather have them go the route, and I think, look, the fan base out there, you're losing them. We know about season ticket renewals. We know about the attendance at games. Look, You're losing them. You need to do something to get your fan base back, and buying in to this quick fix idea is not it. What you need to do, and at least for me, what kept me watching the games is the fact that they have like 7 or 8 of these young kids that have not played more than a handful of games in NHL. It's something. It's a different product. It's different. Like, all right, this is great. I know what Nate Tompkins can do. Nate Tompkins a great player. He's valuable somewhere.
You're being charitable, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I'm sure he has value to some team that is established and not. But at this point in time, I don't need to see Nate Thompson anymore. I need to see, Noah Cates. I need to see Isaac Ratcliffe. I need to see Wade Allison. I need to see these younger guys up here taking their turns and like I think you alluded to in our show notes, September baseball, right? That's what you were talking about.
You can't get too carried away about what you're seeing, positive or negative.
Exactly that.
And usually positive because of the September baseball, phenomenon where you can't draw a lot of conclusions. They're playing some games against teams with guys that are mailing it in, or even against good teams, even if they're getting steamrolled. Guys, if they know they have the game in hand, they're kind of saving themselves for the playoffs. And we're going to see that. There's only 6 more games left.
Yeah. So, but what I was kind of alluding to, though, is for the fans, they're not idiots. They're not dumb.
No.
No. I'm just saying that if you embrace, like you said, embrace it and know, hey, look, we screwed up. I think you would get some fans back knowing that you were rebuilding the proper way, not these quick turnarounds, not this. If it looked like you were trying, you might have to sell a Provorov here and a TK there to rebuild and get those draft picks and get those legitimate number 1 and number 2s that, you're talking about, first liners, second liners, legit ones, young ones, dynamic players, then I think a lot of guys would be, oh, okay, I can live with that. I can live with 2-3 years bad if this is where we're going to be. But if you're going to tell me that we're going to get Kadri and Scheifele and we're going to turn this thing around and we're going to be cup contender next year, nobody believes that anymore. You've been sold that bill of goods now for the last 2 years. Heck, even I thought on paper this team looked pretty decent at the beginning of the season. Now there were other people out there that warned me about it, and I was like, I like to be the optimist, but you get 2 or 3 dominoes fall down, and you face the injury bug like this team did, and it all crumbled, and they were the same weak mental team that we've seen in the past.
Right, and the thing is, it's always the same thing 3 out of the last 4 years. It just falls the hell apart. And if they can come out here, Scott and Fletcher, singing the exact same tune that they did a couple months ago about a quick turnaround, and people are thinking, hey, you are jacking your joints. Just what you need to do is you need to come out and say, we have misjudged what we have here. We like a lot of pieces, but we have to take a more patient approach because we don't want to dig a bigger hole. We don't want to go through the same thing. And you look back at what happened with Ron Hextall, and I've been thinking a lot about what Shane said in our last couple shows when we had Shane Malloy on, in case you missed it. Episode 150 was the latest with Shane. You might want to check that out. And it was our prior show, actually. And he's saying the Flyers had a farm system that was ranked like in the top 5 just like 4 years ago. And I can verify that by looking at the edition of the hockey news. And it said the same thing. It did a tracking of, you could see over a 5-year trend and how it trended down for the Flyers because a lot of these kids graduated and some of the newer picks weren't rated as high because they weren't taken as high. Although I think early returns are that Fletcher and Flair might have done a little bit better job of drafting. Now, Shane thinks that Hextall did a good job in that regard. I disagree. I don't think it was good. We know what happened with Patrick and some of the other players. So he thinks that there's more meat on the bone and there's something there to be spoken about with the development. And we'll get into that a little bit later because I have some maybe not so great news about what Carter Hart is looking like so far. But getting back to the point, if they would just admit that this is going to take longer and that they're going to try and make good value moves to improve the team, but stay young and try to clear cap, accept where they're at, and let some of these kids grow together.
Yes.
I think they'd be better off.
Yeah. And you know what? I was it Shane or was it, I'm trying to think, Kevin Durso that was on our show and said, when they were talking and they had brought up the aggressive retool. The first thing that came out of, I think it was Kevin, he said, why would you telegraph everybody that's what you're doing? You're showing that you're desperate, which is true. I mean, they kind of like, if you were going to go, you just keep that close to the chest and you go out there and you negotiate and you be aggressive in your negotiations. You don't tell everybody you're going to be aggressive. Oh, they're looking for it. They want this guy real hard. So we're going to rape them over the coals and get a huge return or worse, but that's my problem is too, when you're sitting there going and you're talking about your aggressive retool and you're telegraphing all the stuff that you're going to try to do in the off season, it doesn't make good for the negotiating power that you have.
No, it doesn't. And joining us, thankfully, tonight is the great Dan Silver. Dan, how are you, man?
Hey, guys. Good. I'm great. How are you guys doing?
All right. We were just wrapping up a discussion about Charlie's article, talking about how the aggressive retool is a real tough sell right now.
An aggressive article.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
And we totally agree. I mean, the article sounds like us. A lot of the pundits sound like we have for the last several months. And maybe you want to throw a few thoughts in, and then we're going to go through some of these kids and give some positive hope here for some of the fans.
I mean, it certainly is hard to watch what's going on with this team right now and think that, an aggressive retool could work. And one of the biggest question marks is, and I don't know if you guys have discussed it, is Ryan Ellis. And there's just so much uncertainty surrounding him. To me, if you were going to get back a fully healthy Ryan Ellis and a fully healthy Sean Couturier, I think that there might be a chance that an aggressive retool could get this team back into the playoffs and contending, to go a round or two in the playoffs as soon as next year. But based on everything that we're hearing, I mean, it sure seems like a strange situation with Ellis. I was listening to the Snow the Goalie podcast, and it sounded like Chris Therien was insinuating that, he doesn't want to be here.
Yeah.
And there's some other stuff going on. And so with all that uncertainty, it sure seems like an aggressive retool to try and get this team back into the playoffs is the, not the thing that they should be doing, because you don't want to get tied into more long-term contracts like a Nazem Kadri or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. Yeah,
not going to be competitive. Why would you incentivize a team to take on JVR's contract for next year when they're not going to be competitive next year? Don't give away a third-round pick to get someone to take JVR. off your hands, because it doesn't matter. You're not going to be good next year anyway.
Yep, exactly. And that's how we feel. In fact, using Charlie's war model, even Ellis and Couturier added to the mix wouldn't have given them enough, wins to put them in the playoffs. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. But I mean, the thing, we got to wait and see if they're going to be singing a different tune after the season. That's effectively what our message is. That's what our hope is. Otherwise, it's just malpractice. If they're going to go about digging a deeper hole or throw themselves deeper in quicksand by going out and getting like some of the players you talked about. So, but listen, Dan, you're a guy who's known for prospects. And what I want to do tonight, among a few other things, is talk about some of the kids and just your impressions. Look, we were comparing it earlier to September baseball. Whatever you see, good or bad, don't get carried away with it. But there are some impressions you can have and maybe make a projection of where you think they might play. I think Attard's going one place. I think that Noah Cates is basically here, NHL bound and here to stay. But why don't we start with Noah Cates?
So Noah Cates, I've always been a huge fan of his game. I think I've always had him a little higher on my prospect list than some of the other pundits have had. And the main reason is that every time I've seen him play, including, the first time I saw him play was the World Junior Championships. And he wasn't one of the most talented guys on the team. But by the end of the tournament, the coach had him out there at the end of the game, whether or not they were winning or losing. He was on the power play. He was on the penalty kill. He's just a very solid hockey player who does have some skill and talent. And so his floor to me was very high. Like his floor to me was like third line NHLer, maybe fourth line NHLer, but certainly a guy that's a surefire NHLer because of the way that he plays, his size, how defensively responsible he is, the fact that he does have some skill and can chip in some offense. Noah Cates to me is absolutely a slam dunk NHL player. His upside's a little bit limited, but I think that as a third line winger, he's in the NHL to stay.
Yeah, they mentioned something about him not being comfortable playing center at the NHL level. He played a fair amount of center though in college, right?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure how much center he played in college.
Okay.
I've always thought of him more of as a winger, which is how the Flyers have been using him. And so that's what my expectation would be, that he'll be a winger for the Flyers, for the bulk of his career. If you're going to make him a center, I guess he'd be the fourth line center. But I think he's more of a winger.
Yeah, and maybe finally next year, Lashinsky can take that fourth line center role. Let me ask you something. A thought popped into my mind watching Cates play and then watching Oscar. Has Cates kind of taken over? I mean, he doesn't have this scoring touch that Oscar has around the net, but with the way Oscar's been up and down, and I'd love to give him, certainly another try, but with their salary situation, do you just wait on Oscar? Is Cates kind of taking the role that Oscar is maybe a better version of what Oscar has been this year, potentially?
Yeah, Lindblom, it's tough. I mean, you still don't know, at least I'm still not 100% sure if Lindblom's ineffectiveness is because he needs another offseason to gain strength because of the cancer, or if because, whatever treatment he had to go through maybe has permanently sapped his ability and strength. I think that's the question with Lindblom. Right now, he's certainly not a $3 million a year player to me, because like you said, and we, maybe we'll get into it a little bit later, but for me, the Flyers' biggest area of depth is on the wings. And that's where they need to sort of consolidate salaries and players. And Lindblom and Konechny specifically to me are two guys, obviously JVR, but Lindblom and Konechny are guys that, if you're trying to aggressively retool, you've got some replacements for those guys and at lower salaries. And so those are two of the guys that I would potentially be looking to move potentially.
Yeah, Chef.
Also, and trust me, I love Oscar. I've loved him since he came in. And I just think it seems as he's getting older this season, it seemed he's more line dependent too. I mean, he played better with, on higher up the line he was. And when he would kind of get to that third or fourth line, he was disappearing. So I understand when earlier in the season, it looked like he was starting to win back those battles along the boards and stuff. But as the season progressed on, maybe like Dan said, kind of sapped his strength. A longer season, this is his real first full season back. So maybe he just needs to keep working at that muscle mass and building up that, conditioning, and hopefully we'll see something different next year. I mean, Dan's right, though. I mean, and you're right as well, too, because there's really no rush. I mean, if they feel like they can wait a little bit longer because they feel a young kid isn't ready, and they can trade him at the deadline next year and hopefully get something for him, too, if that's the case, if that's what they want to do, or they can go that route even earlier and make the room and save some money and use these younger kids.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, Dan, about, if you're going to make a trade and you're accepting where you're at, you want to kind of get the timelines together. I mean, tonight's show is the Flyers should follow Noah's Ark, A-R-C, not A-R-K. And the idea is get these timelines matched up. If you're going to forget Kadri or even Scheifele, but maybe look at a guy like Dylan Larkin. Of course, he's getting core muscle surgery, so now he's going to lose some of his speed. You don't know. But I mean, that's the kind of trade where you get a Konechny or somebody else, or Provorov, and you try to get yourself a center who projects as like a 1-2 center, and he's still going to have a lot of miles left on the odometer when the Flyers hopefully would be ready to step up.
Yeah, Kadri for sure would be a disaster. I mean, overpaying for someone like that after a big year would be a disaster. Scheifele, if we ended up getting Scheifele, it obviously depends on what the return would be, but he's got 2 more years left at $6 million. So it's not like Scheifele would be the end of the world for me. And if you could trade, for example, Travis Konechny and maybe even you have to give up a Morgan Frost for Scheifele, I mean, I would probably consider that just because, again, if you are going to compete the next few years, you need probably another top center. I mean, I'd probably wait and see what happens in the draft. I mean, look, if this team moves up to the number 1 pick and gets Shane Wright, which, by the way, is not out of the realm of possibilities, then I'm not trading for Mark Scheifele because Shane Wright is probably NHL ready at this point. But if they don't get him, I think that I would probably look at a move involving Konechny to try and get a Scheifele.
I don't know. If Konechny is fairly well regarded throughout the league, I'd rather use those assets for a younger player. I'm just so committed to try and get these timelines ironed out after what we went through with Giroux and Voracek. But yeah, I mean, I could see that because the commitment with Scheifele is not that much. But let's talk about Ronnie Attard. To me, he looks like a guy who really needs some AHL time. Not that I'm down on him because we see the skill package, but you can see that his reads need work, and he's just a little green.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the end of this season because they're signing a bunch of these college kids, and they can't use call-ups from the AHL, so they're just putting them right in the NHL. Yeah. So the fact that Ronnie Attard immediately went to the NHL doesn't mean that the Flyers view him as a better prospect than a guy like Egor Zamula or, even like a Linus Hogberg or some of the other guys down with the Phantoms. They do view him as a good prospect, I'm sure, and he's a right-handed defenseman, which is a big deal. But he's always been a guy that's been tough for me to evaluate because when you draft overagers, he's a guy who wasn't drafted as an 18-year-old. He was drafted as he basically, every team had a chance to draft him and they passed in 7 rounds. And then he was drafted, the next year or the year after that. And he's put together some really good numbers in college, but always against generally younger competition. You can see he's clearly has some talent and some skill, and he's got some decent offensive instincts. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that has to be done with a Ronnie Attard to get him to be NHL ready. I mean, I don't think that he's the guy that you're going to start in the NHL next season. But again, he's 23, 24 years old. So
yeah. He's a late bloomer.
Yeah, so he's also, he's not he's not a 19 or 20-year-old prospect. So I would not be counting on Attard to contribute much next year, and he's looked a little bit out of place to me. He's a lot of bad defensive mistakes that are leading to odd man rushes the other way.
Yeah, I could see that. Chef?
Yeah, I agree. He looks a little out of place. I don't know if a season or half a season with the Phantoms is going to make a huge difference to his game. If he can get his fundamentals down, he'll be fine as a 7th defenseman or a call-up or an 8th in the season, when you got to fill a couple games. He might be okay for that, but I mean, there is something there. It's just, I guess, like what Dan said, if you were going to see a better spark, you probably would have seen it already.
I don't know. I mean, there was a guy, I'm trying to think of, he was in Vegas and then he went to Buffalo, and he's an offensive defenseman, right-handed. I can't think of his name. He reminds me of a Jamie Heward type. And he had good analytics one year, but he's not that really that good. Ryan Pullock is a guy. He's a first-round draft pick. He's
Colin Miller. You talking about Colin Miller?
Yeah, Colin Miller. Okay, good offensive player. I think he started out with the Bruins. I think defensemen take longer. I know he's already a late bloomer, but I think a year or two in the minor leagues. It's the way they used to do it back when I started following the game. And there's 32 teams now. I think there's going to be a place for him in the league. But yeah, I mean, he could be a 6'7" guy, right? The fact that he's right-handed is definitely to his to his advantage. Yeah. So we'll see. I think there's a little bit more meat on the bone. Now, probably.
Yeah, I also think. Yeah. Well, just really quick on that. I mean, again, it depends on where the Flyers end up drafting, but there's 2 very good young right-handed defensemen who are going to be available, in the top 5 picks of the draft this year, in Simon Nemec and David Jiricek.
Jiricek, yeah.
And so, it's also hopefully they're going to, they could get a young right-handed defenseman. I know what you're saying about Attard being a right-handed D, especially if Ellis is not coming back. So Attard could sort of fill a need, but it's another thing where they could use one of those high picks to stock that area. Yeah,
but either way, I mean, putting these kids right into the lineup just hasn't worked out for them in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Very few guys are ready, and even a guy like Provorov, you have to think, well. I mean, I know they waited.
Oh, yeah, I'm certainly not suggesting that if they take a young defenseman, he'd be in the lineup next year. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And especially, it's not an Ekblad situation, or even Owen Power was had to go back to school. But Bobby Brink. Now, we see some of the elements we like with Bobby Brink. That skating, I don't know how he does it, but that hockey IQ just stands out. And he is someone, if the Flyers power play is ever going to wake up, and he seems like he would be a catalyst toward that. But is he? You think he's in the NHL from the very beginning next year?
I do. I mean, I've seen a lot of people. I think Charlie, I saw him tweet. He didn't think he was going to be in the NHL to start the season, or he thought it was, possibly unlikely. I think Brink's been really impressive so far. He's actually looked better to me in the NHL than he has looked in the college games I've watched, and that's. I mean, he led the NCAA in scoring, right? But he didn't, at least some of the games I was watching, he wasn't taking a whole lot of offensive initiative. He was racking up a lot of points with sort of clever plays in the offensive zone. And he's been very good. He's been very effective. He's been strong on the puck. He's not a great skater, but you don't really notice it that much because he's sort of in the right spots and he uses his body really well to shield the puck. So to me, Brink looks like a guy that and Chuck Fletcher loves Bobby Brink. I mean, they traded up to get him.
Oh yeah.
I think Fletcher's, has some connection to Brink's family or something like that. I mean, I think that Brink is probably going to be in the lineup from go next year, unless he sort of really struggles to end this year and he struggles in camp. But to me, he looks like he's looked better to me than Tippett or Frost since he's been here.
Mm-hmm. I think the way like you're talking about positioning, hockey smarts and all, and Tippett's got a skill package that is really something to behold.
Tippett's been really good and Frost has been okay. I think that Brink to me he's looked maybe not as good as Tippett, but it's close. But I think both of those guys have sort of outperformed Frost the last dozen games.
Yeah, Chef.
I'll say this about Brink, and I'm going to throw Noah Cates in this area too. They both seem to know where the puck's going to be at. It's like they're not chasing the puck. They're going to where the puck ends up at. That's where that hockey sense comes in. That they're making better plays on the puck because they're there before the puck gets there. They have this great fifth sense on the ice. I love it. I love that about both of them. To Morgan Frost, it seems like Morgan Frost, I thought, was getting better until all these other kids started coming, and then I feel like he's trying to do too much to set up these other kids, and it's causing these huge, lopsided plays going the other way. And but for Brink, he's real exciting to watch. He seems to be everywhere, much like Noah Cates is in a game. He seems to be everywhere as well too. So I think that bodes well. And they both have really their legs are always moving on the ice. So it seems like they're working twice as hard as they really are. And it just seems that they glide to those open areas, and they always seem that puck seems to find them. Yeah.
And one thing that was mentioned by somebody, and I totally agree about Cates. His skating used to be kind of like an issue. I don't notice it. If anything, he's more of a plus skater. I'm not saying he's great, but he's more good than bad. That's for sure. That's a good thing. So, hey, it is kind of like the elephant in the room. What's going on with Morgan Frost? He's shown flashes really of some consistency, and then his play dips. I don't know. I'm starting to think that, they're pushing him at center, and then they're saying, he could probably be more effective on the wing, but he doesn't deal with contact well. It's like, he's got to do something.
God, he has so much freaking skill, right? Which is why I've been a big proponent of his. I mean, you watch some of the plays that he makes, and he was doing it in juniors. He did it in the AHL, and now he's doing it in the NHL, where you can see that he's making plays that other guys on the ice aren't even sort of thinking about. I mean, he's a very skillful hockey player, and his confidence has grown a lot, and he's looked a lot better, later in the year than he did towards the middle of the year. But he still is not assertive enough, right? He sort of reminds me of, like, if you're in class and there's kids that are, aggressive about getting the teacher's attention, and you just notice them, right? And, like, you could tell that, like, Owen Tippett is that kind of player and person, right? And Frost is just sort of like, he's a little bit meek, and I think he needs to learn how to become more assertive. Last offseason, he was rehabbing his shoulder, maybe another offseason and he gets stronger and that makes a difference. I still think that there's all this unlocked potential there, but you're right. When he's on the wall, he typically will get out muscled for the puck. You can tell he's not really used to going into the corners. His skill is just so tantalizing. But again, Brink is sort of taken to the NHL faster than Morgan Frost ever has, and it's only took a few games. So there's some ingredient missing, and I think it's the aggressiveness and assertiveness. And I don't know if maybe he doesn't have it in him, right? Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I hope he does. But that's the question I have with Frost, because the talent is not in question, immense talent, but does he want it bad enough? I don't know.
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a conditioning issue there and a strength issue that they might need to address. I mean, this is make or break, and I'm not sure he's a Flyer next year. We'll see. Yeah, Chef?
Yeah, and I see a tentativeness. I see a tentative, like sometimes if he when he's reactionary, that's when he's better. When he's in a slot, he's turning, and he just gets a pass off that, like, how the hell did he even see that, Tippett was on that wing? But when he has that extra second to think about it, he's tentative. He's not aggressive enough, and he telegraphs what he's going to do, and a lot of his passes get picked off.
Yeah, he plays as if he's in the WJC sometimes. And like he's flashing his skill, and that doesn't account for anything in the NHL. It's like, don't flash it, do it. And that's when I watch him, I feel like, you're not in juniors anymore, man. You got to put some pro style moves together. And I think a lot of that, like you were saying, is his strength and his tentativeness when he gets those opportunities. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what do you say the same thing to like Trevor Zegras? Like, hey, that high skill shit, like that's not going to work. Like,
well, he could do it. He could do it.
Yeah, but Frost can do some of it too. It's the same thing with Elias Pettersson. Like he tries some, and I don't know exactly what plays it is you're talking about, but like Frost, those are the types of things that are going to separate Frost. But in addition to doing that kind of stuff,
fancy stick handling stuff, he's trying to do too much.
But in addition to that, I mean, I think that is going to be part of his game, but he's going to have to also learn how to get closer into the net and go into the dirty areas a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question about that. I mean, that
will help because that'll make his game a little more unpredictable. I think he's become a little bit predictable. They know if they go into the wall or the corner, I mean, he was great. I mean, he showed some really good flashes on the power play when he got his chances on the power play after G left. I liked it. I thought he was good there. But once the puck goes, like Isaiah said, to the wall, it seems like he's tentative and gets out-muscled.
I think it's almost like he's trying to generate a highlight, and he's got to make more consistent, simple plays that allow his skill to kind of take over closer to the net in better positions on the ice. He's not always seemingly aware of what the next move is that he's making on the ice. Like if he tries a certain shot or a pass, well, if that doesn't work out, it's going to go the other way. So it's time, place, score. It's a little bit of that too. But maybe, we're overthinking that. But a Tippett, I've heard a lot of people talk about his ability to disguise his shot. And, he scored at every level, and now he's getting all these chances, and his speed is just a welcome on the ice for the Flyers. I mean, he can really separate. It's just a pleasure to watch. Now he's just got to finish, and he seems to be aware of that. Listening to Charlie O'Connor the other day talk about he wants to be more deceptive, more like Austin Matthews, and change his angles and things like that, and get the puck off more consistently.
Yeah, Tippett's, and he's been finishing a little bit more recently. You know, I mean, he's had some nice goals of late. That backhand goal that he had, where he just sort of appeared out of nowhere in the center of the ice in front of the net and sniped a nice backhander top shelf, was nice. He's definitely scored a couple nice goals recently, and he's a guy that he's a guy that, again, if they end up moving a guy like Konechny, it's going to be because they've got someone like a Tippett that they think can kind of fill a similar type of role. So Tippett, Allison's the same kind of player, right? If I'm sure that, I'll put it this way, if Allison had been in college at the end of this year and was now signed, we'd be seeing him now. I mean, we're not seeing him because I guess they've got a limited number of call-ups left from the Phantoms, and they want Allison to prove that he can stay healthy in the AHL. But Allison is sort of, not that far off of what Owen Tippett can be. And so he's a guy that could take, but he's got to prove he can stay healthy.
That's the main thing. I mean, it is a comparable skill set. He's a little bit more angry when he arrives, which is good, but he's not the skater, but he has other skill sets. I think he's bolder around the net, and he goes into dirty areas fearlessly, almost too much.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Egor Zamula, a really smart player. Is he 2 inches thick, too long here, or is he just need a little bit more bulk? Yeah, I know he talks about it, so he's aware.
Yeah, I think he needs. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead,
Dan. I'm sorry. I think he just needs. I think he just needs a little more meat on him, meat on the bone. I think a little more time in the oven, so to speak, for chef speak. But I just think I think he's another person you could be patient a little bit with, and I think that if he cooks a little more in the Phantoms, one more year, I think and then get him in the gym a little bit more, give him the Cam York treatment over the summer, have him stay here, and you basically you got a chance to earn a spot at least.
Yeah, Zamula. Here's the other challenging thing is, again, the Flyers have kind of like a glut of left-handed defensemen. They've got to figure out like what the heck they want to do, because they keep trying some of these guys. Like York played the top pair right side with Provorov. Zamula just played the top pair right side with Provorov. They've Sanheim they had in practice on the top pair on the right side with Provorov. Like, they got to figure out what they're going to do so they have some consistency. Because right now you got Provorov, Sanheim, Cam York, and Zamula, who for me are all probably going to be guys you're going to want to have in the NHL next season. Zamula still has a lot to prove. He was pretty good, I think, early in the season with the Phantoms, and he has a lot of skill, and he's got kind of like the it factor. But yeah, he's got to put some weight on, which I would assume that he will. And he's a guy that it's going to be hard to rely on him, but they need to figure out the defense positioning, because it was so nice to get Ellis, and the few games he played early in the season with Provorov, you could tell how important it was for Provorov to have a right-handed defenseman who he could kind of rely on back there, like an Ellis. And so that's why whether or not Ellis is back or not next year is just going to be it's everything for this team and figuring out their defense pairing. So, I like Zamula. I think they just got to figure out what they want to do with him from a side perspective.
I think the Flyers have to do a better job of developing some of these left-handers to play the right side. I mean, this has been going on in hockey forever. And some of the greatest teams of all time are all left-handers and that had one scrub right-hander. To me, I'm tired of hearing this, frankly. I mean, what was the top pair when you had a 35 or 36-year-old Chris Pronger with a guy who was really, at best, a number 4 defenseman, Matt Carl. And then that was your first pair. And then you had Chemo, who was like 34 at the time, with Braden Coburn, who was like a number 4 guy. They're all left-handed. I think this speaks to the development aspect of what the Flyers are doing. I think this is something they should be working on in Lehigh Valley with a real coach. That's a whole other story.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, look, what is it we've always said over the years? That if you get your shot, you make yourself important to the team. When Farabee was making his bones and coming up, what did he do? I'll play penalty kill. I'll play wherever you want me to. He made himself important. He learned how to kill penalties. He threw everything into it. If I'm a left-handed defenseman in the farm system, I'm like, put me on the other side. Put me over there. I will do whatever I can. And I would be throwing everything at it, like to get it done, to make sure, because I'm only helping my chances of making it to the pro level, to the next level, to the NHL. I mean, that's your goal. And if you're not thinking about everything to try to get to that point, then that's a problem also to begin with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree with that, but to me, this is more at a developmental level. I mean, they have to recognize right-handed defensemen are tough to find, and you can't sacrifice too much and lock yourself into a guy like Ristolainen because he's right-handed and a tough guy. If he were left-handed and a tough guy, would they have re-signed him? I bet no.
Probably not.
That's wrong. To me, that is wrong. This has to end. If we get 2 out of 3 are right-handed, particularly in the top pair, it's great, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Get better defensemen, and it's amazing how well it'll work out. That's just my opinion there. Any final word on that? Because I have 2 other things I want to get to tonight.
No, good.
All right, cool. Ryan Ellis, they're supposed to have a resolution announced some point, I guess right after the season. I don't know if he's going to have a procedure. I would imagine that's the case. That Biznasty spit out that at first that it's a hip problem, and then he said, lower body. So I'm not sure. Whenever you have a core muscle hip in that area, you could be you can have an injury that doesn't look like it requires surgery, but it's just not responding to regular care, and you're in this limbo, and that could be what's going on. So,
I don't know what's going on with Ellis. I mean, it's, again, the Chris Tarian's comments kind of made it seem like the player wasn't that happy being here. And so I don't know what to make the whole situation. I mean, the guy wasn't there for team picture day because he was having some treatment. I mean, I assume if you really wanted to be there, you could schedule your treatment around that. So the whole thing seems a little bit fishy and suspicious to me.
Yeah. I hear you. We'll find out if he's going to get surgery, or it could be an Eichel situation where he goes to his doctor. His doctor says, no, you just need more rest. And the Flyers are like, well, you've missed basically the whole season. You need surgery. I don't know. But
and also too, I mean, I think something else, what was it alluded to as well, like that he was sold a bad bill of goods here. And that was brought up somewhere, either reading it or heard it. I couldn't remember where, that he was sold that this team isn't what it was supposed to be. And he was maybe upset of it. Yeah, well, and he is. And that if you're going to say that, then whether it's true or not, then you got to take a little bit of a credit for it not being that. And then I also heard too that they're trying to time it so where he goes right from physical therapy into training camp, surgery, physical therapy, training camp, season. And so where it's not a stop and go situation. If you had the surgery now, you'd stop and you're taking time off or whatever. So I heard something like they just want to go straight through and have them work straight through. So who knows? Who knows which one's right, though?
I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to find out. Now, listen, the last thing major item I wanted to cover tonight was a little bit disturbing discussion between Steve Valiquette and Jason Martinez on the Stick to Hockey pod. I don't know if either one of you guys heard that podcast.
Not yet.
Okay. Steve Valiquette runs a site called ClearSight Analytics. It's one of the premier sites for what Shane Malloy calls research and development in hockey. And it's funny, he sounded like Shane in one spot where he talked about the information, the data that you get should be carried by a coach who's an ex-player who is able to interface with both the coaching staff and the player at their individual or respective levels so that the information can be put into action. So the player could practice certain drills or become cognizant of certain things. And that's fine. But honing in on Carter Hart, he said Carter Hart is really struggling this year in situations where the Flyers are either up by a goal, tied, or down by a goal. And he also said that there's a stat that's really applies to the Flyers. 86% of the time, when one side gives up a bad goal and the other side doesn't, the team that gave up a bad goal loses the game. The Flyers are at 93% with both Carter and Martin Jones. They've lost 14 out of 15 games where they gave up the bad goal and the other team didn't. And now you could say, well, gee, that's a function of the team in front of you and all that. But it speaks to, I think, if you listen to it, the idea is that the pressure seems to be getting to Carter. And he talked about that maybe Carter was rushed, and he likes the fact that guys get at least 200 games in the league. And this is something we talked about prior, Chef. When he came up, because I was comparing Carter to somebody like Thatcher Demko. And Carter has at least as high a ceiling, but Demko got like 100 games before he came up with Vancouver and worked with Ian Clark. And also, speaking of Vancouver, who struggled in Vancouver and then became a premier goalie now in Calgary after he found this game with Ian Clark in Vancouver. And that's, what's his name?
Jacob Markstrom.
Markstrom. So he's a guy, he was drafted like 28th in 08 or something like that. It took forever. And he talked about guys like Carter that come along, that develop some bad habits. A lot of times when they're rushed into the league, they reach their peak in other cities. And then he got in some technical things that Carter is doing that have him giving up shots that are going through him, his head tracking, he's giving up, he's making himself small. That's something everybody can relate to. Yeah. And he's falling back into some of these habits. And you think it really is part and parcel of him being rushed into the league and not being able to make mistakes in front of 3,000 or 5,000 people instead of 15,000 or 20,000 people.
Well, he can make those mistakes now at a game, and he'll have less than 3,000 people there. So.
Yeah, we got a point there.
So
it is worrisome because, Valakit, if you listen to it, the guy really knows his stuff, right? He's got all these numbers about where goals are scored from, how many east-west goals are scored, how many low danger or bad. Those are the goals I was talking about. Bad goals are what they call low danger goals. And the Flyers are really paying the price this year when one of these goalies falls down. So and he talked about some of the technical things about his posture, his head position and all that. So even though he's had a bit of a rebound season, I think we'll all acknowledge that he's fallen back a little bit.
Do they think that the Flyers need different goalie development coaches?
No, they actually think that they were giving Robinson and what's his name? Dillenbaugh, kudos for getting Martin Jones back into his net and doing better. And Carter's definitely played better this year, but they think it's really a function of him kind of maybe not dealing with the pressure of being a 22 or 23-year-old goalie who maybe should be coming up just now instead of being rushed into the league back a couple years ago.
I don't know how much I buy some of that. If you want to argue to me that the Flyers in general are not good at developing players, I would buy that. There's a lot of goalies who came into the league right away and had struggles, and then you get over it with the same franchise. Right? Carey Price, Tom Barrasso. I feel like, if Carter Hart is
Hendrik Lundqvist had 200 professional games before he played the NHL. And he just rattled off a whole bunch of names, and it just really struck a chord with me because I just felt like they went through 8 goalies that year. What was that? 18 or 19, right?
19.
And it was crazy.
Yeah. I'm just not sure that, that means that he would have to go somewhere else to succeed. Like if being rushed to the NHL, you're saying sets back his development a few years or something like that, but that ultimately he's going to go somewhere else and succeed. I'm not sure I understand why you'd say that Carter Hart needs to go somewhere else to reach his potential.
Well, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but in his experience, he's seen a lot of situations like that. And a lot of it is because the player loses confidence where he's at. And sometimes needs to take a step back. And the only way he can do that, because he's trying to stay in the league and in the NHL, he doesn't want that fallback in his career, is he ends up going someplace else and kind of reestablishing himself. You think about Steve Mason. You think about Markstrom and guys like that.
Well, I think I'm leaning more towards Dan. I think it's a little bit of tweaking. I think if they work with him a little bit more, providing that they get, that they have better development in the future, I think he could come along at an easier pace with somebody that can take a little bit of the load off of it for him. And not maybe another veteran signing. I don't know if it's Jones or anybody else, whoever, but I just think that if you take that time and they do a proper rebuild, his timing would probably align with what they're doing right now, what they should do. So if they give him another 2 years seasoning where they're not overly crazy, not overly rushing him or throwing him to the wolves, so to speak, so much that he can develop and come up with some of the younger players on a team and actually be a team. That's the biggest problem. I was at the game with Dan down in Washington. That game, they did not look like a team. Everybody, it was a free-for-all on the ice.
Oh, that was a cluster F.
Yeah, but my point being, that's the last 4 or 5 games have been like that. It's everywhere. Everybody's just going and doing a thing. There's no cohesion. There's no team effort. It's this person goes that way. That like Tippett went for the infamous line change that everybody was talking about.
Well, what a
Tippett went down. Tippett was the only one on the ice. Everybody left. Like that cannot happen.
They're just beaten down mentally. I think they're not. Some guys are checked out, but I think a lot of them they're just destroyed. They this has become the new Flyer syndrome. 3 out of the last 4 years. So we'll see. Hey, always remember, we didn't get Pete Burney until he went away to Toronto and the WHA either.
Yeah, but I think that if they somehow put together a pretty good hockey team in front of Carter Hart with good coaching, I'm not that concerned about what you're talking about. Like, I feel like in that scenario, he would be, he'd be just fine and not have some of these issues you're talking about, but I feel like maybe the environment that the team currently finds himself in that you're talking about is leading to some of these mistakes that Hart's making.
Yes.
Well, it's all part and parcel. There's no doubt about that. So that's it. 6 more games to go. As we record tonight, it's right before the Flyers game. In fact, right at this hour, the Flyers are playing in Toronto, just starting up. So we're gonna
Austin
watch
Matthews
that.
Probably already has 7 goals. The game has
I'm putting in my bid for 8. You're the gambler, so so it's rough. Just before we go, just wanted to mention, just sending good thoughts out to Jim McCrossan and Sal Rafa. Obviously, they have some kind of suit. It's not having to do with a carcinogenic exposure at the skate zone in Voorhees. It's kind of shocking. There's no way we can grasp what the facts are with this case, so I can't really comment. I can only say I have prayers for them and their family that somehow what may seem to be an incurable illness could work out better for them. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a terrible situation, and we wish the best to their families, to them and their families.
Yeah, Chef?
I know a couple guys that I can't believe I'm saying this, but I know a couple guys that drove Zambonis, and when I shared the article with them, I'm like, because I had concerns, because they're like, oh, what? They had a gas powered Zamboni? Like, all the guys I knew, like, they always drove propane or some other form. They never, because they didn't even think that there were gas ones anymore. It was just a total surprise to them. I driven them. He goes, "Oh, I haven't seen one of them since 1990." So that's kind of a scary thing there to think that a professional hockey team still has obsolete, so to speak, gas powered diesel engines or whatever they are.
Yeah, not really sure, but maybe that's a window into what they're talking about. But with that, we are going to wrap it up. The Flyers have 5 more after tonight. They're in Montreal on Thursday, and have a Sunday, Monday at home versus Pittsburgh, at Chicago. That's a weird one. And at Winnipeg, so these are makeup games because of the COVID, whatever, probably. In Winnipeg on Wednesday, and they close out the season at home versus Ottawa the 29th. And we'll come back, hopefully, May the 2nd with a season wrap-up. We have a special guest. We're looking forward to that show. We hope you enjoyed us tonight. Dan, why don't you give us any final words you have and your social media coordinates?
Yeah, I think last show we had, I said I was just kind of having fun watching some of these young kids play, and that's still the case. But, man, it is tough watching some of the mistakes these guys make, and not just the young guys, but everyone, and the lack of structure. And sure is a lot of work to be done this off season. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, fans can follow me at dsilver88 on Twitter. And that's about it.
You got it, Chef.
Yeah, it kind of feels like extra homework anymore, but and you never want this to feel like homework. But yeah, I still tune in for the games. I still tape the games. I jump through them if I have to. I skip the commercials. So kind of just to make sure I don't miss anything from the young kids. It's the same thing that Dan said, that at least you get something to look forward to. And but if you don't agree with that, you can always find me at Chef to Left B on Twitter, and we can always take to a little bit of a discussion about that. That's great.
Terrific. You can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. We're on 12 podcast platforms: Apple, SoundCloud, YouTube. Give us a follow or subscribe. It's never a charge, but it moves us up the charts for people who are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. And we really do appreciate that. You can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Don't forget the _5, Isaiah _520. With that, until next time, everybody, take care.